The difference between agents and workflows is absolutely paramount for you to know. There's so much of hype out there today. Every other company claims to be an agent. There's a lot of content published out there. So I'm going to go straight to the experts here. We're going to look at some quotes, and then we're going to look at an Anthropic article that was released several months ago called Building Effective Agents. And it clearly bifurcates the difference between agents and workflows. All right, so just stay with me here, and hopefully you'll get a lot of value out of this video. All right, so what is the problem? The problem is that 95% of complex AI pilots fail. This is based off an MIT study that came out several weeks ago, I think several months ago. You may have heard about it, but it kind of broke the internet a little bit because all these companies are investing into AI agents, but the results are not showing. And Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce, he went really big on Agentforce, but turns out that it's really not working in the way that they want it to work, and so they're trying to improve it and whatnot. And the information called them out on it, and I think there were a bunch of Salesforce employees that kind of called them out. Essentially, it's like that this thing is not going to work in production if we go really fast. Like, we need to go slow, really understand the problems that we're trying to solve for our customers, and then build it out. So agents, it sounds like a cool term, and the promise of agents is really full autonomy. And the truth is that most firms and most companies don't want full autonomy, okay? They want to save time with workflows. Like, that's basically what they need. All right, so what is the solution, right? The solution is to think of this a little bit long-term, right? Understand where model progress is right now and where it's going. What you build today might not be super relevant tomorrow. So use vendors and work with external vendors to build out AI processes, but just take your time. Andrej Karpathy is he was a former co-founder of OpenAI, and he also worked at Tesla on autonomous driving. Autonomous driving is a really hard AI problem, right? So he knows what he's talking about, and he called 2025 to 2035 as the decade of agents. So 2025 was supposed to be the year of agents, but really it's going to be the decade of agents. If you look at even past technological transformations, it really took time to get to full mass enterprise adoption. Now, AI is definitely different. I mean, the rate of AI adoption is through the roof. I think it like doubled or tripled in the last year and a half, right? I think 40% of US white collar workers like use AI in their work in their day to day. So this is a real thing. Like, people are using AI, but we're specifically talking about agents, right? This premise of autonomy, this premise of AI going off and doing work for you, right? That is what we want to touch on. All right. So here's a simple heuristic for your AI team. Here's a simple heuristic for you to think about as a founder, as an RIA founder, as a wealth management professional. Always use a simple solution that works. Sometimes that means using a custom GPT and building out actions using Zapier. That could be a simple solution to your problem, right? You may not need a complex agentic system. And I am excited about this video because I'm going to get to clarify what this even means, what the core difference between an agent and a workflow. But we'll jump into that in a minute. But here's an example, right? Morgan Stanley's biggest AI success was a meeting summarizer, not an AI advisor, right? So complex does not always mean better. And I think that is an important difference to make. All right. So let's just jump into that Anthropic article. This is what it's called, Building Effective Agents. You can get it on Anthropic. You can just Google it and you'll find it. But what are really agents? It really gives a really good definition of what agents are and what it means, right? These are fully autonomous systems that operate independently over extended periods using various tools to accomplish complex tasks. As I've mentioned before in other videos, as humans, what makes us special is that we know how to use different tools to accomplish tasks, right? And we do it pretty autonomously, unless, we need micromanagement sometimes to do specific tasks. But for the most part, like, most of us can go off and, do the tasks we need to do autonomously. That's the same thing. It's pretty much the same concept with an agent. And except that this agent is a digital agent that has access to unique tools and very specified tasks, right? That's what an agent is. Often the term, others use the term to describe more prescriptive implementations that follow predefined workflows. And that is the key word, predefined workflows. So you have predefined workflows and then you have autonomous systems. Most business folks want predefined workflows. They don't want autonomous systems, right? Workflows are systems where LLMs and tools are orchestrated through predefined code paths. Predefined code paths. Like I said, that's what we want. Agents dynamically direct their own process and tool usage, maintaining control over how they accomplish tasks, right? We don't want the agent having full control yet. It's going to be a long time before that world is coming. We want human in the loop, right? If we're using a full-blown agentic system. Okay, so when and when not to use agents. When more complexity is warranted, workflows offer predictability and consistency for well-defined tasks. And that is the key word. Everyone in a B2B context wants predictability and consistency. LLMs are mostly probabilistic, which means it's very predictive in nature, right? We're trying to compress all the intelligence and capabilities of large language models into these predefined workflows that can solve real problems for our business. That is harder than you think, and that's why it's important to get clear on what are these different, techniques. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. I'm not going to go into these other basics here, but we'll just jump right into it. So workflow number one is prompt chaining, right? So we're going to go through 5 different workflows, and then we're going to touch on one agentic workflow that I think will be completely transformative for wealth management. All right, so we'll use some examples, right? I want to illustrate this with actual real examples, right? A prompt chain essentially decomposes a task into several subtasks. I've covered this in other videos as well. It's really a prompting technique called task decomposition, right? It's a fancy word of saying you give an LLM a big task, it's smart enough to create several subtasks and go about executing it. And each subtask builds on the previous task, right? So it uses the context from the previous task to accomplish the end goal. An example is creating a comprehensive portfolio review, right? So if you think about portfolio reviews, you want to analyze current holdings and performance. Then you want to gate check and verify all the data. You want to make sure that the data is accurate, right? You want to maybe generate some recommendations. You want to create a tax impact analysis, and then you want to draft a client-friendly summary. So let's assume you do this once every quarter, right? That's kind of the standard protocol. You want the LLM to do this in a very deterministic fashion with very specific tasks. And that's essentially what prompt chaining is. It's really giving it one task and having the LLM create different subtasks or sequence of steps, right? The workflow is ideal for situations where the task can be easily and cleanly decomposed into fixed subtasks, like I mentioned, right? The main goal is to trade off latency for higher accuracy by making each LLM call an easier task. So latency is the amount of time that it takes to actually make an LLM call, because we're using APIs here, right? We're using an API to call the LLM and then run the task inside of our environment. And so that can sometimes take time, but a prompt chain is, I think can be a lot more faster. If you try to use it within maybe a chatbot even, or use Zapier Actions or Zapier MCP, prompt chains can potentially work faster, I think, with a Zapier MCP using ChatGPT or Claude. Okay, so workflow routing. So here's some examples to this giving, like generating marketing copies. I think it makes sense. Like marketing copy makes sense too, along with portfolio reviews. Because with marketing copy, you want to make sure you do an SEC compliance review before the final text is generated, right? So you could maybe, let's say you want to make a white paper on the one big beautiful tax, but a little late, but you could maybe, you want to research all the, new laws that were brought about that could affect your retirement planning portfolio. And then at the end of that, you could also maybe do a market, live search just to compare across different sources. And then you could have an SEC marketing compliance review, which is really, a verifying layer, right? So you could do that. Okay, so the next workflow is routing. Routing is one of my more favorite use case because it triggers off like different workflows with like one request. And an example of routing, it would be client servicing. There's no company yet that's doing client servicing work, but it gets me a little bit more excited because I think this is where advisors can really create space, for either prospecting or going out and meeting with clients or doing events, whatever. Client servicing is interesting because you can get a request from a client and then the LLM can decide which workflow it wants to trigger. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you throw in a client request, right? Client asks a question about, say, tax questions, right? Now you have different LLM calls here. You can see that you have the router that decides, okay, this is a tax question. Therefore, I'm going to trigger the tax optimization workflow. So you can have different workflows. You can have like as many workflows as you want, but well, actually, maybe you want to like keep it limited, maybe 8 or 10 core high value workflows. Tax optimization is one. Research and market commentary. Maybe there's a market question they have, a market update. There's so many publications out there today. How does the client know which one to choose from? But what if it could ask you or inside your advisor UI, inside your dashboard, a question, and that triggers the research and market commentary workflow. Maybe they have account issues, right? And that triggers off the operations workflow. Or maybe they have like general financial planning needs. And, that could trigger off the financial planning workflow. So I think you get the point here. Routing lets you classify an input and direct it into a specialized follow-up task. This workflow allows for separation of concerns and building more specialized prompts. I think this is really a cool use case because I think another reason why I'm extra excited about this use case is because it works for complex tasks where there are distinct categories. Now, just remember, pre-LLM, this was a hard machine learning problem, right? This would otherwise be solved by a traditional machine learning classification algorithm that would take a lot of training, specialized data sets, and the whole thing. Like it's a lot, right? But if you understand how to build a simpler routing system, have very clear prompts, just remember that each of these like workflows that I mentioned, those are very like clear prompts and tools that the LLM needs access to accomplish its goal. Just for further context, what makes an LLM truly magical and what makes an agent truly an agent is that an agent is really a large language model, right, that has access to tools, performing tasks in a loop until it accomplishes the task. That's essentially what an agent is, right? And tools are what makes agents really effective. And so you also have to decide which tools you want to give your agent access to. And ChatGPT is agentic in some extent. Like it has all these connectors now. You can trigger web search. You can connect your Notion account. You can connect HubSpot. Those are all tools that the LLM that an LLM uses to either retrieve data or create new tasks. So HubSpot, for example, you can retrieve contact data, and then you can ask ChatGPT to also update, say, an opportunity inside HubSpot, right? The same is true for Wealthbox, and I made a video about that as well. Okay, I'm wasting time here, but let me just jump right to parallelization. So the other workflow is parallelization, right? This is, as the word suggests, running several complex workflows in parallel, right? That can be really useful when you have really complex workflows. It's really as simple as that, right? Breaking a task into independent subtasks running in parallel. So in the past, we spoke about prompt chaining, where you have one task and then it triggers off like a sequence of steps. This is different in the sense that think of like several prompt chains, right? Several workflows running at the same time. And we'll go to a quick example of what that means. Instead of going into the technical details, so I'll just use the example, so that'll probably make sense. An example here is maybe a quarterly or annual client review, right? Most likely annual client review. So you think about annual client review, you want to be able to do portfolio performance analysis, you want to review the tax situation, you want to do the estate planning checkup, you want to do the insurance needs assessment all at the same time. You want to run all those tasks at the same time. Sometimes you may want to use different large language models for each of those workflows. And then you want to synthesize and bring together all those results and then evaluate and find if there are any discrepancies. I think it just has an aggregator. Okay, I think that's what it does. But the voting, yes, okay, sorry, the voting use case. So this is where the review piece comes in, right? So you have all these different. You can create a synthesis of all those different workflows, but then you can also use a voting mechanism where you can review. Here's giving a piece of code as an example, but you can review all the content that the workflow triggered and just compare and make sure that everything is accurate, right? That's really important. This is something that requires more heavy lifting, and you may or may not need it. In most cases, I think prompt chaining really does a job. Parallelization is when you have more complex workflows and you want to get several tasks done at the same time. That's when you want to use it. Okay, so let's look at the orchestrator worker as well, right? And this will finish off with this. I think there's one more. But this is where a central LLM dynamically breaks down tasks, delegates them to worker LLMs, and synthesizes their results. So similar to parallelization, except over here you're using like different LLMs maybe. So you have one LLM orchestrator that gets a task and then goes and like delegates tasks to say Gemini, to the Gemini API, the Claude API, the ChatGPT API, and just accomplishes a really critical task. And here's an example. An example is like preparing for, say, a retirement planning meeting, right? Now, you want the first worker LLM to go and do a social security optimization analysis. You want the second worker LLM. You want the second worker LLM to do a healthcare cost projection. You want the third one to do an estate tax planning review. You want the fourth one to do an investment income strategy. So an orchestrator really decides, which LLM it wants to use for what, and does that, and then synthesizes all of that. Really similar to the parallelization, except that here you're using different LLMs. That's really the core difference, right? And last is the evaluator optimizer, right? Here you generate a response while another provides evaluation and feedback in a loop. And I've touched on this in other videos as well. But this is really using a self-analysis loop, right? You want the LLM to review its own solutions and to provide feedback, right? So you have one LLM that generates the content, you have the other one that evaluates, right? Creating personalized investment proposals is a classic example, right? So you generate the initial proposal and then you have an evaluator review it and look at the risk disclosure, for example, right? So the LLM generates the proposal, you have an evaluator review it, and make a suggestion like maybe the risk disclosure is insufficient for alternative investments, right? Then you have the generator revise it with enhanced disclosures, and then the evaluator reviews it again, and so you have this generate, review, and that creates a really powerful workflow because you have the AI evaluate itself. It's also called self-criticism. Just keep in mind, like a lot of these things are really prompts. It's prompts and, some coding that's involved in it too. But it really takes an agent, a developer, to be able to like chain together all these different workflows and, run it in your own environment, do a lot of testing, and then push it out. So, all right. Finally, we're going to finish off with agents, right? Agents, like I've mentioned, are autonomous systems, but they're getting increasingly better at reasoning and planning. And what's always made humans special is that we can reason and plan, right? The fact that you can now delegate some of that reasoning to an LLM is pretty wild. And so to not just have an LLM do the reasoning, but to also see its reasoning process, right? To look at its chain of thought, so to say, that is really powerful, right? So an agent is understanding complex inputs, engaging in reasoning and planning, and using tools reliably and recovering from errors, right? But during execution, I'll touch on this, it's crucial for agents to gain ground truth from the environment at each step, such as tool call results or code execution to assess its progress. This is really important, right? The ground truth In LLM terms, it's also called grounding, groundedness. You want an LLM, an agent, to have grounding in your data and to do that accurately. You don't want it making up stuff. You don't want it, generating stuff that isn't true. You want it to have ground truth at each step, right? And so that's really what an agent is. And an example of an agent use case is when you want it to go and accomplish a task where, so look at this. This is the definition I was looking for. Agents can be used for open-ended problems where it's difficult or impossible to predict the required number of steps, where you can't hardcode a fixed path. I'm probably going to close this video on this, but that is really the closing statement here. That is what's important for you to remember. If someone promises that they're going to build you an agent or an agentic workflow, just ask them, is this an open-ended problem? What type of an agent is it? Is it a workflow? Is it a prompt chain? Is it a parallelization technique? Is it an orchestration use case? Is it a worker orchestration use case? Like, what are you referring to when you say you're agentic? Is this autonomous? And so an open-ended problem, what reminds me of an open-ended problem in a wealth management use case is maybe like the first-time financial plan that you want to make for a client, right? Agents shine when you can't predict exactly what steps are needed. That is the key. Workflows are predefined, agents are open-ended, right? I think an example that gets me excited about, again, is a business owner that's selling their company and needs comprehensive wealth transition planning. Just think about the number of steps and data retrieval that needs to happen to make this, to build out this financial plan, right? Every situation is unique. That is what is also important. Like, it's not necessarily deterministic in the sense that you have this exact cookie cutter financial plan for all your clients. Maybe if you serve the exact same demography, but every situation is unique. And for business owners, gosh, this is like a great use case, because you need to let's take this business owner that's trying to sell their company, right? Sell their business, and they need comprehensive wealth transition planning, and that's going to be a really popular use case in the next 10, 15 years. You need to understand the deal structure, right? So you need to work with the sell side folks, the buy side folks, and understand, all the moving pieces of what's going on with the sale process. You need to analyze tax implications, huge. You need to evaluate estate planning options. You need to consider charitable giving strategies. You need to coordinate with their existing plans. This is red meat for an agentic use case, because the agent can go off, do its research, use the existing tools and documents it has access to, and build out the financial plan. And this could be documents that the business owner already has, and tools could be tools that you give it access to. It could do live web search. It could look at industry trends for that specific business and what are the multiples that are available for that specific business, right? And this industry in this time. So an agent really thrives when there are open-ended problems. And I think like a business owner financial planning use case is perfect red meat. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope it made sense. This may have been a lot of information, but you can get this article at anthropic.com, and you look at the research section, and you should be able to find building effective agents. But this is like a heuristic for how to think about agents versus workflows. Click on the description, and the link in the description that has a link called Custom GPT, where you can actually test it out for yourself. You can ask questions to the Custom GPT. It's trained on all of this content, and you can put in a task request, like say, a meeting note taker, for example, if you want to build in-house, or a financial planning assistant, and the Custom GPT will tell you whether it's a workflow or an agent. So that makes your job a lot more easier. Maybe you don't have the time to go through this entire content, right? So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and comment. Thanks.